Madam Chairwoman, it's probably appropriate that I take this introduction as a fellow Hoosier, maybe the only one in the room that can pronounce Mr. Buis's name properly on the first try. Tom Buis is the president of the National Farmers Union, NFU. Before moving to Washington, D.C. in 1987, Mr. Buis was a full-time grain and livestock farmer with his brothers Jeff and Mike in my district, the 8th District of Indiana. And his brothers continue to operate the family farm there. Mr. Buis has also worked as a special assistant for agriculture for a man that what I would call a role model, former Senator Birch Bayh. The National Farmers Union has represented farmers and ranchers in all states for over 100 years, operating organized chapters in 32 states. As the president of the NFU, Mr. Buis is here this morning as an advocate for the interests of the family farmers in Congress. Mr. Buis, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. It's an honor to be here, and I do appreciate someone in Washington being able to pronounce my name on the first try. I get all types of attempts, and thank you, Congressman. You know, the Farm Bill and what's going to happen over the next several months is vitally important to rural America. And in preparation for this, what we did at Farmers Union is we held Farm Bill listening sessions around the country. We held over 30 in about a 5-week period. And the purpose was to get the input from the real people who farm and ranch and live in those rural communities for a living. I've often felt that one of the best quotes by any public official was by former President Dwight Eisenhower when he said, "Farming is mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the nearest cornfield." And there are a lot of people in Washington, there are a lot of experts around the country who think they know the answers, but I've always felt that the real answers and the real solutions lie in the people that have to live, work, and raise their families in rural America. As a result of that, what we found out overwhelmingly was that farmers and ranchers felt that the 2002 Farm Bill was a big improvement over the 1996 Farm Bill. It offered an opportunity to provide an adequate safety net, but times have changed since 2002. And reality is we have less money to write a farm program going into this drafting process than we did back in 2002. Actually, probably in real terms, it's back at the level of 1996, which did not prove to be a successful farm bill. So how do we protect the needs of rural America with less resources? We felt we had to get creative, and so we kind of broke things down in two components. One are the opportunities that are out there today, and the second are the challenges. The opportunities in rural America, and I know Mr. English has spent a lot of time out there, but I've never witnessed the optimism that exists today in rural America. And it's primarily because of two issues. One is renewable energy. The boom in ethanol has been fantastic, not just for farmers and higher commodity prices for the products, but also for those rural communities. It's the only towns in rural America where you see the boards coming off the storefronts instead of going back up are those communities where an ethanol plant or a biodiesel plant has been built. I don't think any of us in the 30-some years of advocating the use of renewable energy ever expected that kind of boom to the rural economy. We often talked about our energy security. We talked about higher commodity prices. But again, if you go to those communities, you see not only jobs created by those ethanol plants, but you also see spin-off industries, small businesses to help service it. And that helps the tax base. It helps fund the schools. It helps fund the hospitals. And certainly because most of the ethanol plants and biodiesel plants have been built are owned by farmers themselves. They're a cooperative. That money, those profits stay in those communities and get reinvested in those communities. And to us, that's a very, very positive development that needs to be continued. The other bright spot that we see in American agriculture, and this one kind of came as a surprise to me. I farmed for 20 years and been out here in farm advocacy for another 20. But when I went across the country, all the innovative and creative processes that are going on, and these are small businesses that are doing it, is they're taking the initiative to promote local food, fresh food, direct to the consumer. From selling to school districts their fresh meat, having not just farmers markets, but working with institutions. And that trend sort of started at the upper end of the income level, where people with a lot of expendable income could afford to pay higher prices for fresh, organic, natural products. Now our challenge is how to continue that and get it to people of all means of income, because the product is fresh. Anyone who's had fresh food out of the garden knows it tastes a lot different than our current distribution system, which I refer to as sort of the McDonaldization approach, where everything looks the same, tastes the same, costs the same, and at the end of the day probably lasts a lifetime with enough preservatives for shelf life. Well, people want change, and I think those are two positives we can build on. Specifics on the Farm Bill. I think everyone's goal is the same. There's a lot of differences on how we get there. If we use the current Farm Bill structure on the commodity title, which tends to get the most publicity, we don't have enough dollars to provide an adequate safety net. We currently have 3 programs: the direct payments, the loan rates, and the counter-cyclical. And what I think needs to be done, and what we've recommended, is you shift money out of direct payments into a counter-cyclical safety net. That way farmers, when they get the price from the market, it doesn't cost the federal government any money. And if you've witnessed what's happened in the last couple of years, our federal expenditures have gone down because we did have higher prices. And the number one goal of this Farm Bill ought to be to encourage that, so farmers get their money from the marketplace. I've never met a farmer or rancher that wanted to get their money from the government first. They want to get a profitable price. So we recommended a counter-cyclical safety net, reducing the direct payments. If we did that, we could save enough money to also have approximately $3 billion for other Farm Bill priorities: conservation, nutrition, permanent disaster program. I know each of you have to vote several times a year probably on disaster programs. We get as tired of having to promote disaster programs as you probably do on having to vote for them. We might as well be realistic. Weather-related disasters are going to occur. The crop insurance program helps, but it doesn't fully protect the interests of farmers. And Congress has to step in. We ought to have a permanent disaster program. You can stop the abuses. You can make sure it goes directly to those people who suffer losses. I see I'm probably out of time. Let me mention 2 other things real quick. On the renewable energy, we have this tremendous opportunity, but it's not just corn ethanol, it's not just biodiesel, it's also wind energy, it's cellulosic ethanol, and I think if we move in that direction, we'll all be better off. And finally, broadband coverage in rural America. Rural America is underserved in that capacity, and we need an effort not unlike what they did when Franklin Roosevelt proposed helping electricity for every American. We need it in the broadband sector. Thank you.